Does marketing and content creation ever feel hard and time-consuming? What if it didn't have to be that way?
Join Rob Drummond,
Matthew Bliss,
and me, Pete Daly-Dixon, your ideal companions on the journey to a value-first approach to business growth, here on Help Before You Sell.
We have a saying that most marketing is H.A.T, hard and time-consuming, when in fact, great marketing should feel like a comfortable glove and be generous, loving, opulent, valuable, and easy. Unfortunately, creating something that is a joy to experience and easy to consume is often a lot of work, which is where we pick up the conversation.
have you guys read Simplify by Richard Koch?
No, sir.
I haven't, no. I've read a few of his books, but not that one.
So Richard Koch is the guy who wrote the book about the 80-20 principle, about the 80-20 power curve, and some of your results come from, most of your results come from a minority of your inputs. He also wrote a book called Simplify, and he reckoned that the two most successful types of company in the world were either price simplifiers, as in they can do things at scale cheaper than anyone else. So McDonald's is the classic price simplifier. Or they were proposition simplifiers. So they simplify the proposition for the end user. So Apple is a proposition simplifier. But of course, under the hood in an Apple device, it's actually quite complicated to simplify things.
I can tell you the way that I describe Apple devices to people is that it's probably, let's stick to the 80-20 rule. For 80% of people with 80% of regular experiences, it's a great experience. But as soon as you have something you need to get troubleshooted or solved, you sit in that 20%, and that 20% is actually a long journey, and they're not set up for that.
So if we're going to help before we sell, I think it should feel easy for you and also feel easy for the end user. Although making it easy for the end user is probably going to be a lot of hard work on your part. Or it can be, as we're saying, podcasting, for instance, is accessible to anyone, but it's a hell of a learning curve. You've really got to know what you're doing. It's going to be quite hard to, on the first swing of the bat, create something compelling that sounds great, that achieves impact.
It might even have an inverse result of what you wanted.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't reflect you in the way that you are naturally, and people are turned off by it.
And all marketing, all helping before you sell requires energy. And we only have so much energy. I think you have to be very careful about how you spend that. I was finding maybe 6 or 9 months ago that I was spending quite a lot of time on one-to-one pre-sales calls, where I would invite people to book a call with me before, hopefully them signing on as a client. I was spending a lot of time with people who just ask quite basic questions that actually they could have learned for themselves by listening to my podcast. And then we'd get on, and very few of those actually close to sales. Like my close rate was actually quite low. I felt like I was spending a lot of energy to not actually get much of a result. And it felt like there was a lot of friction. And maybe what we're trying to do in this helping before you sell is actually reduce the friction and also economize on energy. So yes, so perhaps doing one-to-one calls with people does play a role in your help before you sell strategy, but you're not booking calls with anyone who finds you on LinkedIn.
Although I just want to reel you guys back just to lock in where you were pulling backwards a little bit there. I think a lot of people can fall into the trap of seeing where they have a marketing problem and looking for a canvas-all solution where all of their energy goes, but they don't want to spend it there. So if someone is far enough along on the journey and they're frustrated with how few leads they're going to get, they're going to click on the Facebook ad where someone is talking about how they created 27,452 AI generated assets in 8 hours that will guaranteed 10x, 10K, whatever 10 that people seem to be landing on for advertising stuff. And they'll end up with a email marketing blueprint and, a podcast format or a script for ad copy for videos on social media and stuff. And there's often a very wide spread there. But what you both touched on very strongly is to do the G.L.O.V.E approach, but more so the things that adhere closely to what you are delivering in terms of value. It's very easy to have a business focused on a particular thing and offering a particular service or product, but seeing marketing as a catch-all that means you have to do the email marketing, the automations, the social media, the podcast, the book, the blog, but you don't want to spread your love across all those things when you either don't have the energy or it doesn't suit what you're doing.
You've got to really understand yourself.
Yeah.
Or you don't have the budget to engage or collaborate with who's, borrowing a strategic coach concept, the who's, not how, the who's that can do that for you. So you end up doing it yourself. And as Rob found when he attempted to be both the conversation partner and the podcast editor and everything else, it just doesn't fly. It doesn't work. So it becomes hard and time consuming. And generally, in my experience, stuff that's hard and time consuming, it's not sustainable.
Well, that's why you get pod fades, isn't it? And people do it for a while and then they run out of energy, they give up. It is too hard and time consuming. They aren't seeing the immediate responses. Even though we're podcasting, I mean, you often just don't know who's listening. There might be someone on the list who's decided that they're going to spend the 10 grand and they're just waiting until the time is right.
Or just waiting to hear the prompt for the email again or the website link again. But it's really funny, being as close to podcasting as I am, podcasting almost sits in a very ironic, like no set, like a set outside of where all of the others kind of have cross sections in a Venn diagram. Because while it is something everybody can do, not everyone can do it well, it creates genuine, trusting relationships between the host and the listeners. It drives that value, but it may not necessarily drive it back. You will have an audience and a potential customer base, but you can't see them. It's something that podcasting itself has tried to solve for a long time, because podcasting as a discipline, particularly with ad sales, for example, trying to get a cross-section of your audience is the hardest thing to do. And most of the research you see around ad-based ad buys and ad sales for podcasting is from just market research. People doing small-scale sample sizes of people invested or not invested in podcasting to get a small view of what ad buy is like, for example. Do people continue to listen to podcasts? Sounds Profitable is the company that I know that does this incredibly well, and they are helping before they sell. They have partners that buy onto their platform, but they provide their market research for free. But podcasting kind of sits in a weird space where you can do a little bit of either. It can go in either direction, and it doesn't quite work unless you hit like a spot right in the middle of like a metronome kind of thing. You can lean too far into the sales aspect or too far into the trusting and relational aspect. It has to be a combination of those things for a business to make it work.
Well, the easiest thing you can ever do to market yourself, the lowest friction way to market yourself, is to have a conversation. I come into this as a copywriter, not as a out-and-out podcast or audio guy. I'm first and foremost a writer, but I think I'm an outlier in that. For me, writing is thinking, and I write to think. And if I'm going to write an article, I will write it first. I won't record my thoughts. But for the majority of my clients, my copywriting process with my clients has ended up being audio driven, because for most of my clients, it's easier for them to talk through what they want to say and do so in dialogue with me. Much harder for them to just talk by themselves or to talk into their phone or to talk into a microphone in an empty room. It's much easier to do it in dialogue. So I think that's what we're going to do. I think, to me, this concept of helping before you sell, like in this handful of initial episodes, like we're only going to possibly scratch the surface on these things. And I think what we want to do is get to the bottom of the well as deep as we possibly can, bring in other people who specialize in ways of helping before you sell that we don't necessarily do. So we're going to speak to people who are great at webinars. We're going to speak to people who are great at pre-sales calls, and do so in dialogue, in conversation, in a way that is easy to digest and understand, and pick the parts that resonate with you that you feel are easy or easier for you to put in place in your business.
And allow you to come at marketing your business with a glove in your hand as opposed to an ill-fitting hat on your head. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Help Before You Sell, sponsored by Activate Your Podcast. To activate your podcast and help the people who most need you and your services, head to activateyourpodcast.com/help. If you found this episode helpful, please also leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And remember, help more to sell more. See you next time.